Hello and welcome to episode 2 of the Robert Wedderburn podcast. Today I'm talking to Alan Lacy, a wildlife filmmaker and producer from Arizona in the United States, who specializes in filming and producing wildlife documentaries about endangered and threatened species. Hello, Alan, and welcome to episode 2 of the Robert Wedderburn podcast. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, actually. Thanks for having me on. It's going to be a lot of fun, I think.
Where are you in the world at the moment?
Currently, I am in Phoenix, Arizona. I grew up here. I've lived here throughout my life, and then I'm now back here as well. And I'm enjoying the summer heat. You know, it's a little bit warm.
Could you briefly tell us a bit about how you began as a wildlife filmmaker?
I got my start in wildlife filmmaking probably about 10, 15 years ago, in that range. Mainly because I have a passion for wildlife. It's something I've always thoroughly enjoyed ever since I've been a little kid growing up, and just have enjoyed everything to do with wildlife, watching nature documentaries and just immersing myself into the world of wildlife. I've always been fascinated by it. And I think it's mainly because I had this one experience when I was a kid. I used to spend hours out in the countryside just exploring and looking for animals. And this one day in particular, I was probably, like I said, 10 years old or so. I was out with my dogs walking through the countryside, and I saw this coyote out on this levee a little ways away. It was just sort of walking along the levee. And I was just like enthralled by it. So I sat down in the alfalfa field, kept my dogs close, put my head back, and I howled like a coyote. I just put it back, just went back, and it stopped. And it turned and looked at me, and you could see its ears pricked up, and it was just like doing this whole like sideways ears, like trying to figure out, like every dog does, where does that sound come from? And I howled again. Only this time, now the coyote turned and started walking right at me. And it just kept just traipsing, walking closer and closer and closer and closer. And it would pause every so often and kind of listen again. And I howled, I think, one or two more times. And then it came up so close that I could see its eyes, and I could see the detail in its fur, and I could just see the complete beauty of this animal. And I was just captured and enthralled by it. It was like I was looking into the eyes of a wolf, is what it felt like to me as a kid at the time. And then my dogs caught wind of it and spooked it, and it took off running across the levee. And then my dogs chased it, and then it felt like one of those cartoon moments when you're holding on to the leash and they're pulling really hard, and you're doing everything you can to not fall over because they're pulling you faster than you can run. So we went across the field, up over the levee, down to the other side where there's another field, and the coyote had, was way out there in the distance, but it turned and looked back, and I don't know whatever came over me. I did it again. I howled like a coyote, and it came right back at us. I don't know if it was because of the dogs, but it came even closer this next time. And this time, I could really see the greens and the yellows in the eye. At least what I perceived as green as yellows. I'm actually colorblind, but to me, it was even more incredible that time, because it was probably, I would say, about 20 feet maybe away, 20 to 30 feet away. And I could just like see, it was like I was looking into, like, say, the soul and the essence of a wolf. And it was the first time I really connected with nature. The first time I really had that experience where I'm looking at another animal that's obviously not a human being, it's not a pet. It's a wild, sentient being. And you're just like, it was life-changing. It completely transformed the way I thought. And I've always wanted to work with wildlife ever since. And, you fast forward through life. I go through school, I ended up in college going through architecture, decided not to do that, went and ended up getting my pilot's license and going through aviation, thinking maybe I'd be becoming a flight instructor, go the whole pilot route. And, but still that calling to be with the wild still persisted. And I ended up volunteering at a wildlife shelter or wildlife rehabilitation center, rather, here in Arizona, a place called Southwest Wildlife Conservation Center. And at the time, they had 18 Mexican gray wolves in their facility as part of the captive breeding program for the species survival plan for the Association for Zoos and Aquariums. And it was like this kind of like this full circle moment from coyote. Now I'm actually in an area where there's literally out there's wolves, and there's something about the Mexican wolf that just absolutely captured and captivated my my heart, really. And there's 18 at this facility. In the wild, I learned they had just barely been released back into the wild, and there was only 42 known in the wild at that time. Yellowstone was still going through their recovery, but Mexican wolves were released in the wild in 1998. And this was in like 2007. So almost 10 years after they'd been released. Yellowstone wolf population was doing great, but the Mexican wolf population was only 42 and struggling. And their numbers would go up and then crash a few years later. And there was something about that. I was like, how could there be 18 in captivity? And then I learned there was over 300 in captivity at other facilities around the States and Mexico. And I was like, I got to do something. Something just drove me to try to do something to make a difference, and put a bunch of feeler emails out. Nothing happened until I actually connected with this group called the Grizzly Bear Outreach Project in Washington State. And their executive director at the time responded to one of my emails, and he happens to be one of my really good friends now. He's a host and presenter and narrator for PBS Nature. His name's Chris Morgan. And he said, hey, mate, why don't you just call me on this date? Let's talk. I love your passion. So I did. And he set me on this path. He's like, you don't have to be a biologist, to be able to make a difference. He says, you can make a difference who you are right here, right now. And he's like, you ever thought about making a film? And I was like, well, the thoughts crossed my mind, but I don't have experience. He's like, well, you don't need to be a filmmaker. You can just produce it. You can hire the right people, go get a person who's in film school, et cetera. And you can make these little short documentary things that can help create awareness. So I didn't realize how much work was involved in the process at that time, but off I went. And, he put me in touch with a gentleman that's worked with him. His name is Joe Pontecorvo, an amazing cinematographer and filmmaker, does a lot of stuff for PBS Nature, et cetera. And Joe then put me in touch with one of the folks that he's worked with, that he's kind of helped mentor over the years. His name was Dean Cannon. And so Dean and I spent the next about 5, 6, 7 years producing the first documentary that I ever made, Gray Area, Wolves of the Southwest. And took me forever because I obviously didn't know what I was doing, just shooting from the hip. But Dean had the experience of filming for a couple different shows like Alaska State Troopers, et cetera, for Nat Geo. And collectively, his knowledge and my enthusiasm paired up great to be able to produce that film, which took us 7 years to produce, and about $85,000 to raise fundraising through nonprofit, fiscal sponsorships, et cetera. And that's what got me into film. And I've fallen in love with film ever since. I mean, it's the creative process. It's all of that whole thing about connecting people to nature, where I locked eyes with a coyote back as a kid. If I can capture those moments on camera and give people that same experience, that's what drives me. That's why I do what I do. And that's why I love what I do.
So it sounds like, to me, your spirit animal, or the animal that you are most connected to, is coyotes and wolves, much like the way I have a connection with snakes.
Yeah, I definitely would say that. And it's funny you mentioned that, because I've always felt this connection to coyotes and to wolves. And then they definitely, I feel like, are my spirit animal. But weirdly enough, like the one that really I've always been fascinated with, raccoons. Don't understand it, but they're the ones that I have ever since, because I think we had raccoon tracks all in our house. I started to spend hours out in the country looking for those guys. But coyotes and wolves are the ones I actually connected with on a visceral, like primal level. There's something when you're out in nature, especially in wolf country, or areas where wolves should be, where they currently aren't in areas. There's just something about those places that you feel connected to that essence of that spirit. It's what makes the landscape really feel wild to me. And that's what, I don't know. That's just, for me, that's what makes it the most important part of it. It's like, how do we maintain the balance in the habitats, natures, and all that good stuff? That's wolves really capture that for me.
Well, I think it's also where you encounter those animals. So when you encounter a wolf, I would imagine that it would be
a big surprise to you, and it's not something that you would see or expect to see in your garden. So when you're out in the middle of nature, it can be quite an intimidating animal to see.
Yeah, and wolves, every time I've ever seen a wolf in the wild, usually, for the most part, they're always a long ways away. And they want really nothing to do with people. They're usually like, you get a lot of footage and a lot of pictures of their butts, their tails off because they're running off the other direction. So to be able to get the actual footage where you can see their face and their eyes, that's asking a lot. You can go to Yellowstone and you can film wolves there much easier because they have these wide open expanses, and they're more, I wouldn't say they're comfortable, but they're more familiar with people and the presence of people in the area. So they don't obviously come up close very often. They do occasionally, but usually they're off, half a mile to a mile away. So it's really hard to film good quality footage. You gotta really put time into it. Here in Arizona, New Mexico area where the Mexican wolves are, we don't have like a Lamar Valley where you can just set up and film them across the valley. You have to get out. You have to sit yourself down and wait and really understand how the wolves are using the landscape, and then get lucky when they move through, because you have these little pockets of visibility with the meadows that we do have, or clearings, and then it's just all forested tree areas. And so you'll get a glimpse of them maybe running across the meadow or clearing, and that's all you get. So it's really tough to film these guys here in Arizona. So, I've been out a couple times already and looking for them. And I actually had an opportunity. I have a YouTube channel. I did film them a couple summers ago, and they're a long ways away, but it was still a remarkable experience. First time I'd seen them in the wild on my own without the assistance of a biologist, radio collars, or when they'd been trapped and then collared and outfitted with one of the radio collars and then released back into the wild. That's often when I'd film them in the wild, so to speak, is opening up the crate and letting it out. So seeing them on my own after years of producing that film was amazing.
What were some of the challenges to be able to raise the funds, and how did you go about raising funds for your first film?
Oh man, that was definitely a challenge. So one of the things I learned, it takes a community, it takes a power of the collective, especially when you're trying to use it through like crowdfunding. That's how I ended up doing most of my funding, was through crowdfunding. So I launched a Kickstarter campaign. I had seen all these other successful Kickstarter campaigns and I just had this feeling that, okay, money is going to come in, and launched it. And I think I was looking to raise like $35,000 or something like that for the first round. And, I think I raised $6,000 on Kickstarter, and Kickstarter's all or nothing. So there's definitely nothing. We didn't get it. And I learned pretty quickly, it's like, okay, this is a lot of work. So then I ended up going over into Indiegogo and partnered up with a lot of the nonprofits that work in wolf recovery and conservation, different wolf sanctuaries like Endangered Wolf Center, the Wolf Conservation Center, California Wolf Center, Wolf Haven International, a bunch of different ones that all had really massive social media presence and following that were also aligned with trying to help and recover Mexican gray wolves. And so that's their mission. And so they couldn't directly ask for funding because they have to, obviously answer to their nonprofit and to their board, et cetera. But they were able to share all of the social media posts, or several key ones that I'd created to do so. And collectively, using the massive, I think there was a collective of almost nearly 2 to 3 million people in their network. I was able to raise I ended up asking for 25 and raised 30. And off that would allow us to hit the ground running. And then I did another one a couple of years later after we had basically done our first couple shoots, and then it was finishing up the film and a couple of private donations. But that's why it took 7 years to produce the film. It's just because I had to not only learn filmmaking, but I also had to learn fundraising, and that takes a lot of time, takes a lot of patience, a lot of connecting with people and establishing relationships and trust, right? So people aren't going to just give funding and money to something if they don't know what's on and they don't trust it. So how do they know that I'm going to do what I say I'm going to do with the project that I'm saying I'm going to do? So being able to showcase that is important. So for anyone listening that's looking to develop their own new projects, you got to establish trust. You got to establish, that you are the one capable of doing this job, and it's gonna turn out what you say. And it doesn't have to be the most amazing, incredible thing, but if you're telling a good story, if you're doing good work, and you're a trustworthy person, like that goes such a long ways in the eyes of donors. And it's a lot of work. You got to put the work in, you got to put the effort in, and that's I think that's the biggest key. You can't just sit back and wait for funding. You have to go out and find it. You have to go out and make those connections.
What are the differences between a nonprofit film company and a regular film company, and what made you decide to go the nonprofit route?
I think in my experience, particularly with starting my first film, Gray Area, I raised a lot of the funds through a nonprofit route. So for all the Kickstarter stuff, that obviously is not a nonprofit route. But when I was raising funds privately through folks, friends, family, other people that I connected with, I usually worked with a fiscal sponsor, and I learned like, hey, this is a great way you can actually get funding because they can get a tax write-off, and that tax incentive for them to support was a very valuable thing that I learned. And it's hard to when you make a film, it's hard to sell it and make your money back. So if you have investors, typical the for-profit route is depending on how you secure your funding. The most common routes are usually pair up with different investors or people that are looking to maybe make a return on their investment. And when you sell the product, traditional Hollywood, for example, like you'd secure your funding, you'd go out and you'd produce, you'd have development funds that you would have investors support. Then you would have production funds that investors would support. And in that support, you would be giving back a return to your development investors from your production investments. Same thing when you finish and now you're moving into distribution. Now your distribution investors come in and they give out, and that's where you pay off your production. And then when you sell, that's when you pay off your distribution. And now some investors can invest into the distribution at the beginning. It's all convoluted. It's all kinds of ways you can finance a project. But the ultimate thing is you have to sell your product to get your money back as a filmmaker and to answer to those investors, your shareholders, et cetera. It's kind of like a small business, basically.
So would they be selling the film to a platform like Netflix or Disney, and then they would have the rights to distribute it?
Correct. Yeah. So there's that route if you're doing it independently, where you would sell the rights to an entity to then it's a broadcast or streaming service platform, whoever's going to purchase the film and acquire those rights, they would be basically buying those rights to do that. And you can, there's so many different ways that works, whether it's, it's a one-off sale and they buy exclusivity, or if you have the opportunity to sell to multiple different platforms, or it's a non-exclusive deal where you, as a filmmaker, you can make more. And it's hard to do in just normal film in general. Now you add in wildlife and conservation and nature. It's a much harder sell because those are such a smaller niche. You're not, unless you're like making something like Planet Earth or a larger series like that Netflix, that those folks are working in. That's where the eyeballs are going to see the film. That's where the big budgets come in for those productions. But being a small fish in the sea, so to speak, trying to make films, it's much harder to get confidence in that industry to purchase your film to put it on a platform. And I noticed it in a couple films that I've been wanting to produce. No one was interested. And then I saw a lot of friends that had produced films that were just sitting out there and not getting picked up anywhere. And my film Gray Area as well wasn't picked up anywhere either. And I realized how hard it is to get a film on a platform. There's a lot of companies that are in the industry that are based, a lot of them are based in actually Bristol in the UK, but there's others that are through Europe and elsewhere that do seem to get the lion's share of all the productions that end up on, whether it's the BBC, Nat Geo, PBS, all the different public broadcasting across different countries. They do tend to get a big chunk of those projects. So I realized that this is probably going to be a harder process for me to go, starting off as a company rather than doing the traditional route, which would be, okay, go move over to the UK, start as a runner, become a researcher, eventually develop myself into maybe an assistant camera or work in the camera department somewhere and work my way through the industry that way, which is obviously a great viable option for anyone listening. That is definitely a good route to go to get into the industry. But it was a route I was married at the time and I didn't really want to do that. And I wanted to, I've always been kind of a maverick, honestly. I've always just kind of shot from the hip and kind of like, this is what I want to do. I'm going to go do it.
I think it's also very hard if you're a driven person and you're a go-getter, you want to take the initiative and get out there and do stuff. It must be very frustrating to start as a runner and move your way up over various years, trying to establish yourself in your career when you already know exactly what you want to do. You just want to get out there and film. I know for me, that's been the case.
And especially when I started, I was, little later in life. I'd already been through college, already had a degree going. I ended up with a business degree and working in the world for a while. So I was already in my mid 20s, which is still young. But I was looking at it from the perspective of like how to start a family and all that stuff. And I was thinking, okay, it's going to take me a good, 5-10 years probably before I can get to a point where I could actually be on camera, or not on camera, but behind the camera and doing what I want to do. But ultimately, what I really want to do is produce. I really want to be the guy that's like helping develop and create the stories. And that's where my passion is, more than actually like filming, is creating stories and narratives, finding those unique stories with people in conservation, and then finding those creative ways to tell that story. That's what really fuels me, and that's where I get the most inspiration from. And so to get to that level, now you're talking a lot more years, because now you've got to work as a cameraman. You got to eventually work in the producing side of things. You really got to understand the whole industry, which is obviously, again, very important to do. So if you're listening, that is a very great route to go. Like I say, I'm a maverick. So I was like, I just want to start doing this right here, right now. Which is ultimately what led me to launch the nonprofit, because I've seen how hard it is to sell films and to get funding when you're trying to make for profit. It's a little more stress involved, because now you really have to answer to these other people to make sure they get their money back, because you're really, there is obviously that fact that this is an investment. There's a chance that you may not get your money back, and it would just be a bad investment. But I don't want that kind of pressure. So I knew that deep in nonprofit was the route for me. And so over the years, I've actually worked with fiscal sponsorships, other nonprofit organizations that have helped me raise funds for the projects that I do. And then finally I realized, hey, I just need to launch my own. So in 2022, I'd gone through a divorce the year prior, and it allowed me to really kind of like base myself, really, really think through what I want in life. And I realized this is the goal I want to achieve, and I want to get out there and do the work that I want to do in making films. And it's worth putting the time and energy and effort into launching my own standalone nonprofit. And so filed all the paperwork, took a lot of work to do that, partnered up with a firm to help me with that. And in 2023, in March, we got our 501c3 approved by the IRS, and we hit the ground running, formed a board of directors that I'm really proud of. And it's a great spattering of people in the conservation world, both from like philanthropy, from zoos and aquariums, scientists, and filmmakers. So it's a really great collective of people that really help steer my passion in ways that we can really truly make a difference. And it's been one of the most fun and exciting things in my life that has been super fulfilling, because now I get to do the work that I want to do, produce the films I want to produce. And it's still, if you make a film, you want it to be successful. You want it to, you still want it to be profitable. As a nonprofit, you can still make profit. It's just the funds are not returned to the shareholders and to the owners, et cetera, when you make profit. The profit from a nonprofit goes right back into the organization, into the mission, into the stuff that actually the nonprofit is set up to do. It doesn't benefit any of the owners or shareholders. And that's the main difference. So you still want to make your money. You still want to sell your films. You still want to get that out there, but at least you're not beholden to an investment kind of thing where you're like, if you don't make your money back, then you become a failure. That was the big thing, I think.
It sounds like your business model is very much like for a lot of other filmmakers, it's very similar, that they honestly just want to go out and make a film that they are passionate about. And if they can make money from it, then that's awesome. And then they go back out with the money that they made from the first film and they go and make the next passion project. So it seems to be quite a similar model.
Yeah, it is. And it's what's nice about it from the nonprofit route is it gives the people that support it the tax write-off. I think it's more than that, though. I mean, a lot of people who do give on a larger scale, the tax write-off certainly does mean something and it's helpful, but it's more about the mission. It's more about the cause. It's more about what they're actually supporting, and that's why they give. So, and I think that's true across the board, whether you're for-profit or nonprofit, right? So, but being nonprofit does give that extra added bit of being able to write off the donation for tax purposes, et cetera. But it also, like I said, it does free us up too to, like, if we wanted to do a story on some species that's an underdog that doesn't get the limelight, it's not this big sexy animal that they like to show, on all the different streaming platforms, et cetera. It's just something that needs attention. We can do that without having to worry about eyes and ratings. We can still produce something that's important, that gets the word out and gets the message out. Because it's one thing to make a film. That's the other part of what Real Earth Films, it's the name of my organization, that we focus on is it's not just making a beautiful film that creates awareness. It's how does it have impact? What is this film actually doing to make a difference for the species or the subject or, whatever your focus is for your story? How is it actually making an impact? And so, like, a beautiful film is amazing because it creates an emotional appeal for the audience to connect to the story, which I think is important. But connecting to a story doesn't do anything for the species unless you're actually getting involved some way, somehow. And so that's another big part of our mission is supporting these organizations, the researchers, the biologists, the actual on-the-ground work that's being done for species. And whether that's giving back financially, whether that's helping with research, whether that's helping with education, equipment. Some organizations are really looking for assistance on equipment with the research they're doing. So it's being able to give to those avenues of research and supporting these groups and people that are doing the work, because then you can actually measure the impact you're actually creating. And then in the films themselves, giving people who watch it, when they connect, here's how you can get involved. Here's how you can actually make a difference. You can support these organizations. You can support us, which then we pass through to the organizations. There are ways, or you can get involved, by actually physically being present with those organizations and doing as a volunteer. So, like, there's so many ways that you can actually make a difference. And that's a big part of what our drive is. We want 50%, basically half our energy into making films, half our energy into making the impact and really truly making a difference for wildlife in this planet.
If you could just explain a little bit about the business model and how you are able to use this to give back to research and to the projects in those environments.
So one of the things that we do in our model of how we operate is, so if we're raising funds for a project, for example, let's say we wanted to produce a short film about ocelots or something, right? So we would go out and look for the funding for that. But in our quest for funding, what we're setting up in our budget for this particular story would be, let's go out and raise 50 grand because that's what it's going to take us to produce a short film on ocelots. Probably would cost more than that, just considering how tough of a subject they would be. But let's say that was just 50 grand to produce a story on ocelots. And coupled with that, we would want to make that impact, right? So 50 grand for the story. We would also want to put about another 50 grand into the marketing, into the support, into the impact of what we can do for that species. So we would need to raise ultimately 100 grand to produce this entire campaign for the film, and for the impact campaign that supports ocelot recovery, and really truly makes a mark on the landscape to supporting ocelot recovery in, like, say, Texas or New Mexico, here in Arizona, whatever. And that would be how every one of our projects is going to be based in a model very much like that. And we're still new. We're still kind of like growing and building our capacity. So right now things aren't quite to that level, but that's our goal, getting to that point where 50% film, 50% impact, because that truly makes a difference. And for some films that, let's say, they're $1 million to produce because they're a massive, feature length doc or something that, maybe we have rights already figured out how to distribute it somewhere. It's a much larger film. It's going to require a much larger budget for marketing. So there's the marketing part too that you have to also factor into your budgets. But on an impact, you're looking at a much larger scale now because you have a much larger audience potential. So that's, again, where you have another big chunk of change. If it's $1 million for the production, $1 million for marketing, and $1 million for getting out to that impact part. But another thing that's cool is, if you can't get your project picked up and you don't have the rights already established for, like, say, a broadcast, which, again, those are really, really hard to do. Unless you're one of the big heavyweights in the industry that's, already has a really good rap sheet of all the films that they've produced for all these networks, it's really hard to get your film in. Another great strategy to do so would be, taking this Ocelot example again, is to produce this film, but then if you have 50 grand also set aside in your impact, that you can use some of that for marketing to create impact in your audience. And then you can actually pay, like, advertisement fees on YouTube, and you can self-distribute as a filmmaker. And if you can get 100,000 eyeballs on it, maybe you spend a little more in your advertising budget. Maybe you can get up to 1 million eyeballs on your project. Now you have the collective of 1 million people who have seen your film on YouTube, a free platform for anyone to watch. Now you have the ability to reach a whole new audience that you've never reached before as a single independent producer. And that is the kind of the model that we're looking at doing right now, actually, because now you could really, truly reach an audience. And through that, those people that watch it, you could end up with new connections, new networking opportunities, people that maybe want to fund and support your work because they love what they saw, people who want to get engaged with the actual conservation that's taking place, where they can make a difference for ocelot recovery, et cetera. That now you have 1 million people who are potentially involved in ocelot recovery and can support directly the work that's being done on the ground. So you're empowering a collective of people through the work that you're doing that way. And to me, that's one of the models that we're really looking at doing in these short form content things, whether it's a 10-minute film, 5-minute film, or if it's a half hour, for example. You don't have to have very specific timed shows to meet a slot for a network. You can create whatever length you want that fits the story and the needs of the story, or the needs of whatever social platform you're working on. You can cut a 20-minute piece down into multiple shorts that you can put on TikTok, social media, Instagram, et cetera, and actually use those to drive more eyeballs to the story and make a bigger impact that way too. And giving people tangible ways where they can interact with the campaign itself, where they feel like they are actually making a difference, because they are. That's the big thing. It's one thing where oh, cool, great film, here's a donate button link, and the money goes back into the producer's pocket to make another film. That's helpful, but it's more about, once the film's out there, we're not beholden anymore to make that money come back in. We still want to make a profit. So if someone picks up the film, great. But if no one does, I want that film to make a difference for wildlife. I want that film to make a difference for the conservation organizations. So once we have spent the budget to produce, and now we're moving into the impact side of things, because we always start with impact, even from the very beginning, that money that people would then support would go directly into the conservation of that species. And that's our goal within the next 5 years, is to get to that 50-50 model, and where anyone who donates or gives in that impact side of things, 100% goes to the impact of that species. And that's the ultimate model we're actually driving towards as well, too, where when anyone does give, 100% goes to the mission of the organization, where they can feel confident, hey, 100% of the funds we've donated are going to the production of the film or to the impact, or we know that 100% is going to be split 50-50 for impact and for film. It's not going to be going to like salaries or the cost of the building. I mean, those are important things that we need to pay as well as a nonprofit, is our administrative cost. But we're working on behind the scenes right now, trying to secure enough funds where that can just be taken care of year to year. So any donations that do come in would just go straight to the mission of what we're actually about.
Yeah, it's obviously very expensive to run any kind of film company, and it would be amazing if you were able to get your film company, the funding for your film company, to the state where you've got so much money coming in that only 10% of it is being used to run the actual business side of it, and the rest of it is just going straight out the back door to all of these organizations, and you're able to help them. And you can just go from one film to the next one, and you can just carry on choosing the next topic or the next species that you would like to help conserve.
Absolutely. I mean, because it's like, a small nonprofit in the States is considered $1 million or under, So if I can just be the higher end of a small nonprofit, $1 million a year to cover the mission and the budget that we need, it's really not a big ask. I mean, there's a lot of nonprofits that you're talking hundreds of millions of dollars that support their budget. Look at, the World Wildlife Fund, they're close to $1 billion, if not over $1 billion in their revenue that comes in. And they're large organizations, so they have a lot to support, but they also do a lot of great work on the ground too. But as a small nonprofit, any filmmaker who could get $1 million a year to do a story or two or several, could change the world, in my opinion. And so I think if we can eventually grow to that capacity, that's my 5-year goal, is to hit the 1 mil mark per year in donations and funds coming in. We can literally change the world with that. I mean, the films that we could produce, the campaigns that we could actually create, and we can focus on species all over the world with that kind of budget. It's mind blowing to me what's possible. It truly is. And you can empower an entire new generation of people to fall in love with wildlife and to really, truly make differences. As well as there's so many people in our industry that are looking for work, that are starving for being able to get out on those projects that they've always wanted to do. But currently, there's a lot of people they're really good. So don't get me wrong. Like, there's a lot of people in the industry that are seasoned veterans that are amazing and they're super talented, and they get the call often to go out on these bigger shows. Whereas these younger people are always like just scrapping, trying to get the scraps to get into the industry. And it's a lot of hard work. And so like my organization has the opportunity with a budget like that to bring in a good mix of these people, seasoned veterans that can actually help mentor, and then pairing up with younger people that are looking to get involved. And we can really, truly help on that end of the thing and the side of things on the industry as well, and reach new audiences and really, truly make a mark on wildlife conservation around the world. So $1 million a year is really not that much. And ultimately, the idea is we can work with, and partner with different philanthropists or whoever to get to the point where we could bring in, let's say, we can create an endowment fund, basically, get to like the 10 mil into an endowment fund, maybe. That would cover all of our administrative expenses as a small organization. If our organization grew, we would need to increase that a little bit. But as a small organization, if we were to go out and raise $10 million and have that set into an endowment fund, the interest and the profit again, so to speak, off of that is the return off of that endowment fund would support the administrative cost in perpetuity for the life of the organization. Then you can truly say 100% of any donations that come in would go to the mission of the project. that's what ultimately that my 10-year goal is, to get to that 10 mil for the endowment fund. But to be able to say that 100% of your donation goes to the film, goes to the impact, that's our goal. That's really where I'm working towards. And I think it's ambitious. And again, like I said earlier in this podcast, I'm a driven dude. I really want to make this happen. And I see it super clear. I've never been so clear in my life on the path I want to take. And this is, to me, the route that makes the most sense in my brain, because it makes a difference. We're going to be able to really change the hearts and minds of people, and actually get into the trenches and help the conservation work that's being done on the ground. And as we grow and as our capacity expands, that impact is going to increase exponentially as well too. And then we're also going to be able to help the young people in the industry and supporting jobs and work within the industry too. And that's kind of like a secondary passion of mine, is to be able to help the young people trying to get involved in the industry, men and women that are really talented people, to get involved, because I know how hard it was to get where I'm at now. And there's so much, and we still have a long ways to go to get where I want to go. But knowing how hard it is, and seeing a lot of my friends in the industry who are trying so hard to break in still, even though they have credits on several projects, they're still just fighting tooth and nail to break in. I would love to be able to support that and give these people opportunities to really shine and really showcase their talents. So that's a secondary passion of mine. That's kind of, it's a fun one to kind of like think about how to help and support the industry.
It sounds like a very ambitious project.
Yeah, it definitely is. And I've never been a guy that dreams small. I'm always a dude that looks at the big dreams, and I go like, how do I achieve that? How do I go about doing that? I didn't realize how hard it was to get into film until I got into film. And then I realized how fun it is and how incredible it is. If you'd asked me before I made my first documentary, if I would have ever made documentaries, probably I would have thinking I'd be a wildlife biologist. Didn't think I was going to go into film. And then I look at that film and I go like, wow, I actually did that. That's pretty crazy. And it's picked up small awards at small festivals, but it's very validating to like see your dreams come into action and see it actually take place. And there's the one thing I've realized is you have to get out, and you actually have to put the work in. You can't sit and let things come to you. You have to go out and get them. You have to actually do the work. So if you're thinking about making a film, you can sit on your butt in a chair and dream about it, which I think is a great way to start. But eventually you have to get out of the chair and start doing something and actually making it happen, whether you're raising the funds, picking up your iPhone. I mean, iPhones are incredible. I just downloaded an app last night, Black Magic app on your iPhone, and it changes your whole camera or your iPhone into a cinema camera. Basically, it's crazy. You can do a lot of things with an iPhone, and you can go out and change the world making films with your iPhone. So, like, I think just get out and do is kind of like a huge motto of mine. Is don't be passive. Go out and make a difference. Do it.
I don't know if it's the same for you, but for me, I just feel like I have this idea that I have to do, and I literally cannot breathe unless I do it. I just, every project that I've wanted to do, I'm so passionate about that it just has to happen. And it doesn't matter if there's enough money or if there's the people or if it's too far away. It just has to be done. What's it like for you? Do you feel that same feeling?
I'd say it's very similar. I definitely have to do it. Like it's a calling. It's like this innate thing inside me that it's just like it burns, and you have to do it. Like it's like if you don't do it, it'll just eat you alive, And so, like I said earlier, I've never felt so clear in my mission and what I'm doing. And a lot of that can be attributed to my partner that I'm with. She's been incredible. She's also a life coach, so she's been great at helping to still some of the things that I've worked through over the last few years, especially after I went through my divorce and everything was kind of upended at that point. She's been incredible I have to give her a lot of credit for helping me refine and refocus my energy in my life. And I've never been so clear on what I'm doing right now. And it's hard to explain, but in a way, it's almost as if everything that I'm setting out to do already exists and it's there. I just have to follow the path, do the work, make the connections, and it'll be manifested the way that it feels like it's already in existence. Like it's already been created. It's already there. It just takes, the actual diligence on my end to get there and to make it happen. It's just like, yeah, I think that's right. It's like, you're going to go on a trip and you're going to go somewhere. You know what the road looks like. You know where your destination looks like. You've seen the pictures. You know exactly what it looks like. You may have never been there, but you know what the beach looks like. You know what the resort looks like because you've done your research. You know how it's going to go. That's how it feels to me, is like, I know where I'm headed. I've done the research. I'm putting the work in, and I know that's the destination I'm headed to. So I've never felt that way before. And it's a very incredible experience to feel this way. And I definitely would say it's a feeling I have to do it. Because if I don't, I don't see how I could let that be. It's too much of a drive.
I just think there's so many opportunities out there, and a lot of wildlife filmmakers don't know about it, or we aren't connected as well as maybe other industries. It's very hard to make those connections and meet with the right people and to know which path you should be going on. And the example that I always think about in my mind is that if you go outside and you are looking to buy a certain car and a certain color car and a certain model, you'll suddenly see that car absolutely everywhere. Every traffic light that you get to, it'll be there. And it's because you're looking for those opportunities. So I think it's important to stay positive and to think about what it is exactly that you're looking to achieve. And by doing that, you're going to be on the right path, no matter which way you try to get it there.
Absolutely. I think when you have your eyes on the prize, so to speak, as the saying goes, you actually, it fuels you to continue on that path. There's a lot of people that say write your motivation on the mirror in the morning. Every time you wake up, you see it, or put something on a wall that you see every day that you can say, and you can be like, okay, this is what's keeping me up. I think there's a lot of power to those things, because when you repeat something positive like that in your life, whether you meditate, whether you pray, whatever you do to give you that inspiration, those are the things that you do to really fuel you and to get you on those paths to that positivity, to keep that change in your life focused on the right direction. And like you say, if you are looking to buy a car, it's the same concept. If you looking to raise funds, suddenly if you get out and do that more, suddenly you start finding the opportunities that start showing up more and more and more. And I think what happens is the more you move into that space, the more you learn about yourself ultimately, right? The more you really truly discover the skill sets that you have to go out, find funding, or if you're not a producer, you're not looking for funding, if you're looking at just becoming a better camera operator or whatever, editor, etc. The more you go and do that, the more you network, the more you actually have those experiences. You learn who you are as a human being. You learn the things that make you tick, and what when you wake up in the morning, what gives you that fuel and that passion. And if you can keep reigniting that vision and reigniting that passion, that's what fuels you and sustains you. Whether you're introverted or extroverted, that's what fuels you and sustains you. And I think that's a really important thing, is to stay grounded within yourself in a way where you truly can take that time to reflect on who you are as a human being and just align yourself with your own personal mission. And I think that's a big part of it too, because then whatever you do, everything you see, it's all going to be part of that mission, and you're going to just see it everywhere.
Do you think that YouTube has helped you to encounter the opportunities that you're looking for? Because with my YouTube channel, I've noticed that there's a lot of videos that I've just put out there that in the moment I didn't think were quite important in the grand scheme of things. And the most bizarre opportunities have come from just doing the work and showing everyone what you're doing.
Absolutely. I think YouTube is it's a great model for anyone who's looking at like kind of getting industry. It's like a test bed. It's a proving grounds, really. Like it's a great way to just start your craft. And for me, YouTube has been a great way of kind of like, I have my big projects that I work on that are not on YouTube. But they're like my gray area. The first one I just did, actually, I just did put it on YouTube. It's just, I use selling it for the last 5-6 years, to try to recover a little of the costs, which has taken a long time, but now I've put that for free for everybody to see. But anyways, what I'm getting at is it's a great way to, if you're looking at learning how to tell stories, if you're looking at a way of how do you grow as a filmmaker, YouTube is a fantastic outlet for that, because you can throw whatever you want up on there. And you can learn from the experiences of, I edited this project this way, or I edited it this way, or how do you keep an audience's attention? What do you do to like really keep them enthralled to the story you're creating? Like there's so much you can learn by just creating content and putting it on YouTube, and don't worry about it. Create it, put it, let it go, see what happens, see the metrics, but don't worry about it. Just just put content out there and learn and grow and experience. I think for me, that's been one of the biggest things, is learning that over the last, several few years of doing that. And, my channel's not big. It doesn't have, I don't have episodes with hundreds of thousands of views, but collectively as the channel, over 100,000 views. And it's pretty amazing to see that people are actually resonating with what I'm producing. And it's pretty consistent across each episode to episode. There's some that aren't as popular, but others that are. And it's fascinating to see what resonates with people, which helps drive how you produce your films moving forward. Like, people are interested in these kind of things, or the story that moves like this, or these kinds of films. Super helpful. And then the connections you make from it too are pretty amazing to how that works. I was in Yellowstone earlier this year, just filming a wolf, and I was asking someone standing next to me, I was like, hey, is there other wolves? Am I only seeing the one, or is there more? Weird connection of like, hey, don't you have a YouTube? He was like, don't you have a YouTube channel? I'm like, yeah. And then we had this connection. Funny stories. He actually lives here in Phoenix, so we've connected as friends now. And he's a photographer. We go out and shoot and film.
Oh wow! And
it's a really neat experience to be completely elsewhere in the world and meet someone who's passionate and same kind of work that I do, and weirdly lives in the same area. So we're able to go out. In fact, we were out a couple weeks ago looking for wolves here in Arizona, and just neat experiences that way. I just never saw coming. And it's really helped kind of shape, and as I think also driven more for my organization, how we're going to look at the model that we're looking at for producing and self-distributing ourselves, as we work into the future of creating new series and new film concepts, of using YouTube to get as many eyeballs as we possibly can on our stories and subjects. And I think that's it's been a very invaluable experience through YouTube so far in learning these things, because I think it's really powerful, and it can be super transformative.
I think your idea is to change the way that people think about a certain species. Then YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, they're the place to be, because not many people have the time to go and watch a series, to sit down in the lounge, in the TV room, and decide what they want to watch. And often, a lot of the time, there's a lot of other options that are more exciting. Maybe a comedy, something else, and most people don't want to sit down and learn about nature. But if it just pops up on their phone, and then they say, whoa, I've never seen that before, and they learn something in those 20 seconds or 30 seconds, or it pops up on their feed and they click the link, then it's obviously going to make a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, it's one of the things that's like, it's hard, right, in the industry, because like if you look at a lot of the shows that are being produced now, like with big budget films you see on Netflix or on Apple TV, wherever, the producers are having to go the extra mile to really, to really capture an audience. So they're all the new shooting techniques, the crazy $100,000, shot that takes place to get that incredible experience for the viewer. Like there's so much of that now, just in order to capture and to bring someone in to want to watch that, just to get them to see what the story is. It's very, what would the right word be? Cultivated shot to get the viewer interested. Whereas what we're looking to do and what we're trying to do is like, again, YouTube, TikTok, all these things, you don't need that. I mean, a good story, something that really just showcases, people are just starving for information about the natural world in ways, especially on social media. When they see it raw and true and pure to the way nature is, that's what's captivating to them. When they actually see an animal do something incredible on its own without highly expensive camera and gear, that those clips go viral, So it's like, that's the kind of stuff that we're looking to do. That's partly why I've titled my organization Real Earth Films, REEL. So it's not just film reel, but we're telling real, true, authentic stories the way they happen in the wild. And I think that's an important thing that I think gets overlooked too, is like people are, they want that real experience. They want that real, true, authentic nature. They don't want they're not these projects that go well above and beyond to cultivate and curate a story are making a difference. They're important. And I think that we still need to do those. In fact, I might even do one of those in the future at some point too, but it's going to be a real story. It's going to be true to how nature is. It's a tall order.
I think they both have their place. They're both super important. And if Netflix is promoting a documentary, a big production, and there's millions of people watching it and there's millions of people that are interested, it's obviously going to help the industry. It's going to help everyone. It's going to help nature, because people are going to watch conserve nature, and they're going to get more interested in nature. So they're both very important. But I like what you're saying. And I think for me, what I feel is that a lot of those old grassroots documentaries that made us love nature so much, we don't get to see them anymore, and we don't get to see the stories of one individual, one person's story with nature, connecting with nature. Those kind of stories aren't on Netflix. They're very hard to find. You have to go onto YouTube and really work hard to find those kind of stories.
Mm-hmm. It's true. I mean, I remember growing up as a kid watching shows where, like you say, it was a long form content, just showing this really, in today's day, it'd be a slow moving story, but it really captures the beauty and the essence of an area, of a landscape, of the temperament of what was going on. Watching some of the old, shows by the Joberts or Bob Poole, any of those folks, it's like that longer form style it's what we grew up on. It's what we really enjoyed watching. And now you have these massive shows that get, like you say, they're great. They do make a huge impact, but you'll notice that, in today's world, where if you don't capture our attention in 30 seconds, we're bored and we move on. So a lot of these series are doing these short vignettes throughout the entire episode, constantly changing and constantly keeping us interested. And that's the way the formats are these days. And I think it's important. I think it's good. Hats off to them to figuring that out and making that reality. But I think it's also like, on the social channels, that longer form, people are connecting to those too. Some of the longer stuff I have on YouTube, I look at the metrics, and it's shocking how many people are watching all the way through. I'm impressed with. I didn't expect that. I mean, yes, the overwhelming majority of people bounce, but a good chunk of people are still watching all the way to the end, telling me that these people are engaged in the story itself in the longer form. So I think that's what I love about the YouTube and the social media aspect, is that you can get that short form, but for the ones that are really interested, they can dive into the long form. And that's kind of in our model, we're exploring how we have our longer form coupled with our short forms that drive each other and help fuel each other's metrics.
And I think obviously YouTube is a excellent place for people to practice. I always think of it like practicing, and I'll make a documentary, I'll have an idea, and I'll put it out there and I'll see how it does. And it's a wonderful way to begin. And if you want to go do other bigger productions, you can always go that route. Or if you want to self-fund and create your own stories, as you say, real wildlife productions, you've got that option. And there's no one there that's curating it or telling you what to do.
Exactly. It's literally your canvas, right? You have the ability to paint that story however you want. It's like I said earlier, it's like your proving grounds. It's really where you can cut your teeth on how you tell stories, and you can learn the things that work or don't work. And you just throw your projects out there. And the other thing that's cool is, like, you don't have to get a bunch of expensive equipment, a bunch of camera gear, to spend thousands of dollars to be able to go out and do that. I mean, you can, like I said, you can use your iPhone, and you can download, get that Blackmagic app if you have your iPhone, because it really does transform your phone into being able to have high quality stuff. And you can even shoot ProRes in that, which is crazy to me. And you can use the wireless feature. If you have birds that come to your bird feeder, you can put your iPhone right up next to it, use the wireless app, sit in your living room, hit record while the bird comes up right there, and you can get that nice close-up shot. You're not disturbing the bird, and you can capture some fascinating behavior that way. And I think there's so many tools and resources available to people who are looking to get into the industry, looking to tell stories. You have a whole opportunity. And you can even edit the whole thing on your iPhone. You don't need to go out and get a bunch of stuff either. So it's like, YouTube's a great way to learn and to test and to experiment and to figure out who you are as a storyteller, I think.
Well, when I started as a wildlife filmmaker, I remember it was something like I didn't have the money to buy a camera, but I really wanted a camera now. So I went out and I bought an iPhone, and I used the iPhone to film a video that earned me money so I could buy a drone. Then I used the drone to show that I was good at filming landscapes and wildlife and aerial footage. And then I used that money to be hired as a wildlife filmmaker. And then I was able to buy my first camera. So there's definitely a way to do it if you're passionate and if you want to do the work. You don't have to start with big game and large-scale productions. You can start small. You can film ants. You can do whatever. There's always a story to be told.
Yeah, I think that really gets to it, right? The story, right? So it's you can film really crappy footage, but if the story is good, people are going to watch it. It's amazing how you see people aren't looking for the high-end value production, like beautiful cinematography. I mean, it has its appeal, but if the story is crap, people turn it off. So if you are really looking at developing your skill sets as a filmmaker, the equipment, sure, that helps, but really, truly what it comes down to is story. It's really honing your skills as a storyteller, knowing how to bring a viewer into that story, where they can connect to it, and it's, how do you tell that story in a way that actually gets there to watch it and to stay on and to enjoy the whole thing. It really comes down to your storytelling abilities. So that's where I think YouTube's great, because it really gives you that opportunity to test how you tell a story. And again, you don't need all the expensive equipment. It's, again, the story. So really honing your skill sets as a storyteller, I think is really truly the most important thing in learning how to get into this industry.
So with regards to story, is there a story of something that you would like to work on in the future that's special to you?
Oh man, there's so many different stories that I'm passionate about. I think there's one that I've always wanted to do. I'm kind of like waiting for the right opportunity for it. I'm not gonna share too much about it, but I've always been fascinated by cheetah. So in the back of my brain, I've always kept this concept around the story about this cheetah that I want to do. It's a pretty remarkable story from where I'm coming from on it too. So I'm hoping to jump into that as we grow Real Earth Films and the capacity gets more built up. I'm going to start working on integrating that story more into the forefront of our development, and then kind of jump out that way. But yeah, cheetahs I've always been fascinated by them, and they're an crazy, incredible species. And my heart breaks too, because you've seen the trajectory of where, I mean, it's just across the board, endangered species all over the world. I mean, you see the same story over and over and over again. And that's, I think, one of the hard things in our industry is staying positive when you see all the negative, whether it's this species or that species and climate change and, oceans rising and all the doom and gloom. Is how do you stay positive, and what can you do to maintain that attitude so that in your stories, they don't just come off as these doom and gloom stories, but that there's hope and that there's inspiration and that people can feel like there's something they can do, because there is. And I think that's the main thing for me is I've always been a glass half full guy. So I'm always looking at the positives and everything. So it's just how I'm driven, how I'm wired. So it's telling those stories that are positive. And I think ultimately, I think my passion and mission is endangered species and in species in peril, whether they're endangered or not, species that in habitats that are being threatened or et cetera. I think that's where my mission is working to protect those things and giving those species, those habitats, ecosystems a voice, because oftentimes film is the best way that those can have a voice and really, really be heard by peoples and communities. Sometimes it's communities that are actually directly involved in the habitat destruction itself. Like you can look at Brazil and the destruction of the Amazon. It's a lot of the local people that are clearing out the forest to create way for the all the farms for cattle and such. It's like those are the people there. So it's like how to educating people, bringing that awareness in and trying to work. It's one thing, people sitting away in countries far, far away that support it is one thing, but getting the people that are locally there that need that education is the other huge important part of that cog in the wheel, so to speak.
Deforestation is a very hard thing to understand, because for a Westerner, for someone that's detached from the forest, from the jungle, they just see it in the grand scheme of things, but they don't see what's actually going on. And if you go and you chat to the locals there, they see it as progress. They see it as They didn't have a way to make money. Now they can grow cacao, they can grow coffee, they can have cattle, they can make money. And it's very hypocritical for a Westerner to go to those people and say, what are you doing? This is crazy. You're destroying the forest. How are we going to breathe? They don't see it that way. Yep. And it's so there has to be another way to reach those people. And I think that conservation and national parks is one way to do it. If we're able to provide jobs to those communities, then they'll have a sense of urgency to protect those places. And I've seen that here in Ecuador, that because of ecotourism, they don't want to destroy certain places. They've still got a few places for farming, but it's far more profitable to have tourists come in and enjoy the nature, but there has to be an economic benefit to it as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's the big key, because it's almost all of that is economically driven. Even the wildlife trade is economically driven, and it's understanding the metrics of how that works, and it's where we can actually learn how to educate and change and transform that. If you can replace that economic stimulus with something else that they can provide an income for, ecotourism is a great thing. I think there's so many new ways we can innovate, I think, as well in that space. There's a lot of solutions, a lot of things that we have probably yet to discover that could probably make significant impact. It's worth exploring, absolutely.
What would you consider your proudest moment as a wildlife filmmaker?
Proudest moment as a wildlife filmmaker? It's a great question too. There's a couple that come to mind. I think the first one is like the first moment that my first film won an actual award, and I was at the Albuquerque Film and Music Experience. It's a pretty decent sized festival. Jeff Bridges was there that year. He was the main headlining guy, and it won Best Short Documentary. And I was floored. I did not expect that. It was just there for the experience, really. and having won that award was phenomenal. It was like, oh wow, I actually made something that was good. Like, it was a really neat transformative experience for me to actually realize the value that I provided and who I am as a human being. It was really cool. And I think the second moment was the day that Real Earth Films got its 501c3, what do you call it? The IRS gave it that status. And that was because that's years and years and years of work put into all the stuff I've gotten to that point, and seeing it come to realization was an incredible experience too. So I think those two moments, my first film, first award, and then all the years of hard work put into actually getting the organization up off the ground and running, I think were huge moments for me, milestones that I felt the most proud about. And I feel like there's going to be a lot more of those moments, I think, in the near future as Real Earth Film grows and we get funding and we get stories and we truly make differences. And we see, like, a project that we complete, and then we can look back in a year or two following it and be like, oh my goodness, look at this. We've done this, and this has helped protect this many acres of forest, or this species it was declining by this rate, and we put a bunch of work and effort into the conservation here. And now that decline rate has slowed to this, or maybe reversed and gone the other direction, and now they're recovering. Those are the kind of moments that I'm looking forward to experiencing as we grow this organization.
Well, if you specialize in filming endangered species, it would be wonderful to be able to film something and then be able to go back and film it at a later stage and see that there's been positive progress, that it wasn't just filmed in vain, and it wasn't just a sad story, that actually there's a difference that's being made.
Absolutely. That's my hope and my dream, honestly, is to, it's not when we develop our films, we're going to be developing our impact alongside it. So it's not an afterthought. Like, it's a very active, engaged process in the film making scheme of things. Like, if I'm going to tell a story on ocelots again, right? In the very beginning, I'm looking at the impact. What are organizations? What people? What are the needs? What needs to happen for a recovery? And our impact campaign is going to be built out at the same time the film is being built out. So in tandem, the two work together, so that hopefully, in a year or two, once the film's out and it's doing what it's supposed to do, we can look at, like, oh my goodness, the percentage of people that knew who ocelots were at the beginning was, I don't know, I'll make up a number, 15%. Now, after several years of this campaign, now 84% of the population understands ocelots and they want them, and they're, now you're seeing the actual tangible results take place. And then in 5-10 years, suddenly there's an ocelot population. How cool would that be? That's where I am really driven to do and try to make a difference.
So a little example of that was, I was in a friend's reptile park in Florida a few months ago, and there was a little girl there, and she knew absolutely every single species of snake that was in this reptile park. And I was blown away, because I've been keeping snakes and studying snakes for my whole life. And this girl must have been about 7 or 8 years old. And I said to her, how do you know so much about snakes? And she said, I watch YouTube, as if it was something completely normal. And I said to her, most people don't know so much about animals. They really don't. And she looked at me as if it was quite bizarre that other people didn't know this stuff. So
that's amazing.
These wildlife films can make a huge impact.
And I think kids are a great place, right? I mean, that's where I fell in love with wildlife, right? I mean, I watched nature documentaries and things. That's what drove me to go out into the countryside and have that experience with that coyote, and that's, the coyote basically sealed the deal, but as a kid, that's where you fall in love. That's where you make the difference. And I think it's important to keep that in mind. So make films. Kids love nature. Kids love wildlife, especially the more that you have urbanization taking place and everyone's moving into the cities. There's less and less people getting out into the country, out into the wild, out in the nature, bringing those experiences in film. Those kids are sponges. They suck that stuff up. They love it so much. And I think it's huge. And YouTube is honestly probably the best place now for that. Kids love going on YouTube and checking it out. And so, I'm actually exploring a couple ideas for some children's concepts to a little down the road, but something I'm definitely passionate about too is feeling. I mean, how many of us grew up on those shows? Like one show in particular that stands out for me is called Kratz Creatures, and it's the Kratt brothers that produced this show for the public broadcasting here in the States. And a lot of people I know that grew up here in the States in my generation loved that show, and that's where they got their connection to nature from. And it's powerful what film can do for a young child, informing their love and their relationship to the wild.
Yeah, I think that exposure is very important.
Absolutely. I mean, it really, when you look at anything that you believe or that you look at in life, like whether you believe specific politics, whether you believe specific religious stuff or not, like how you are and what you are as a child is usually what, how you're raised is how it's shaped. So if you're raised with wildlife programming, like a lot of us were, you fall in love with it. And I want to create as much of that programming as I can for kids to get involved with. That's down the road, but it's one thing Real Earth Films I'm looking at doing is creating a way for kids to connect to nature, whether it's the programs that they can watch, but then also they can become a part of the organization. We can send out these fun, almost like a Boy Scout kind of thing, right? Where they can get a little pack on like how they can look for animals in their backyard, how they can enjoy seeing nature in their backyard if they're like in the city, or if they're out in an area where they can. Maybe they learn how to cast plaster prints of animals and learn what animals are what. Just ways to get kids interested in nature. I think is a huge part of what I'm looking at doing down the road a little ways further. But yeah, it's another passion of mine is to really connect that, because that's how we all fall in love with nature. It's cultivating that next generation of wildlife stewards and conservationists.
If we are able to expose the next generation to nature, and they aren't isolated and they aren't just exposed to an urban environment, and they do have this connection with nature, they will learn to appreciate it, in my opinion, and they will want to hopefully conserve it.
Absolutely. It's powerful. A child is, I think, the most capable to understand some of the concepts that, we often think, oh, they may not understand it. What they do. Kids are very perceptive. They understand so much. And nature to me was a place I went to for comfort and support and safety often as a child. And I want, for me, it's like creating that space for them to go like, hey, nature doesn't judge. Nature just is. You can be there. You can go there. You can experience it. You can enjoy it. You can learn. And you can connect. And it's a place that no matter what their home environment is, nature always is a place that they can be. And I think that's a big thing that I want to be able to do, to just really somehow highlight and create a very fond place for children to enjoy and be fascinated by and be enthralled by, and to constantly stir that curiosity. I think that's the big thing.
So you talked briefly about film festivals. How do you think that film festivals have helped your career? Have they helped boost your career? And how do you feel about film festivals? I know for me it's been quite difficult to get into film festivals, and I don't know if it's actually worth it. What have been your experiences?
Yeah, that's a tough one because, they're hard to get into. Film festivals. It's interesting because some you get into, you're like, I didn't expect to get into that one. And some you don't get into that you're like, I thought I for sure was going to get into that. So it's really, it really comes down to their programming and what they're looking for. For me, film festivals, kind of a mixed bag. As far as the film itself making a difference at the festival and helping me in my career, I'd say no. It hasn't really done much. But going to the festivals, some certain ones, and meeting people and networking with people, that definitely has been a huge boost to my career. Going to Jackson Hole, it's a super expensive festival for sure. Be the same like going to Wild Screen, probably a little less, but still expensive. would be great places because it's industry specific. So you get to meet people in the specific industry I'm in, obviously wildlife filmmaking. So if you're looking at growing your career, those are two really good festivals to go to network and to meet people and to learn from, maybe connect with a potential mentor, et cetera. Because, in the industry, the power of who you know it's a very valid and important play. But a lot of other festivals, non-wildlife festivals, I've met a lot of people, made a lot of good connections. Maybe at some point I'll do a story with them or something. But it's been helpful in, I think, the long run, basically because you can say, hey, I've gotten this film, it's won these many awards. You can say that you can validate that you are actually you're actually producing films. Like, you have history that showcases this film was released this place, it picked up this award, it was at these festivals. It does kind of start creating a track record of your ability as a producer, as a filmmaker. And I think collectively, each festival maybe not be something that is significant, but the collective of all the festivals that you can get your films into, that I think starts making a difference. Because when people want to work with you, they're going to look you up and they're going to see, oh, this person is maybe a camera person on this show on IMDb. They might know to hire you. But if they're looking at working with you as a producer or a filmmaker, if you're doing the whole thing, then they want to see, like, oh, what's his experience there? But if you don't show festivals or awards or things that you've done by attending festivals, I think it's a little harder sell. I mean, you can show your work, obviously, and they can see your work, and if it's good, it's going to speak for itself. But I think having that extra metric of showing festivals is an important thing. I'm kind of with you in the sense, like, is it really worth it? I think individual festivals may not be worth it, but again, the collective, from an experiential standpoint, when people look at the work you do, I think it does make a difference. I think it does help. But whether you spend a lot of money going to a certain festival, I'd probably say be very picky and selective of which ones you want to attend. I think Jackson and Wild Screen are great for networking. If you eliminate the idea that your film's going to go there and win an award and be an amazing film. There's always that chance. If you have a really good film, you probably could. But I think it's more important for the networking and more important to establish and build that community of people that you enjoy being around. Because I think that's where your opportunities come from down the road. You meet 50 people at a festival, really connect with a few of them. In a year or two's time, you might get a phone call and be like, hey, you talked about this. Do you want to, we're looking for someone to do this film. And I remember you mentioned this, that you do this kind of work, and would you be interested? I've had that conversation before a few times. So based off of connections I made at Jackson Hole back in 2019, and it's like 2024. So like 4 years later. So I think very valuable.
It's also very hard to trust people that you haven't met in person, and maybe just going there and putting yourself out there and saying, hey, will allow you to have a lot more opportunities, because you'll be able to suss out the people and work out who you would like to work with. And you just got an idea of the opportunities out there unless you've had.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's, like I said earlier, that in this industry, it's a lot of power of who, like who's the person that does this? Who's the person that does that? And if you stay in your shell and you don't get out and you don't go to festivals and you just sort of stay recluse, the power of who is the factor there is less. If you're cranking out really incredible work, the work's going to speak for itself, and you may not have to. But generally speaking, you're going to need to get out there and you're going to need to connect. And you can create the most amazing thing, but if you're not a good person and people don't like you and they don't trust you, they're probably not going to work with you. So it's like, you need to get out there and just be you and showcase that you're a good person, you have qualities, you are a trustworthy person. And that's I think, where a lot of people get their work from.
And if you're looking to fund your projects, unfortunately, the animals that you are filming don't have the money to pay for the production. So you're going to have to be a good people's person.
Yeah, it's a challenge, because you have to, especially in the funding circle of things, I'd say it's a little more quirky there, because you certainly, same principles apply. You have to be a good person, trustworthy, all that, but now you're also like, why should somebody donate or give you thousands of dollars to tell a story that you want to tell? Like, why would they want to do that? And so it's like, you really have to showcase who you are as a human being, your trust value, your connection, your relationship to that person. What I've discovered in a lot of ways, some people give because it's, they're passionate about a certain species, but often the bigger funds that I've ever received, they come because the person respects me and they believe in what I'm doing. It's more of that relationship that's been cultivated over time, where they see the work that I'm doing, they see the passion, they see the drive, they see the results that I've done, and they are like, love what you're doing, here you go, and keep it up. And it's impressive what just simply being yourself and what it can do. That's where I've received the largest of donations over the years. And I've definitely received donations in good amounts based off of specific causes and cause based. But even in that regard, it still has an attachment to who I am as a human being and the belief in what I can do with that cause. So I think ultimately it's like, just be true to yourself and cultivate those relationships that really showcase who you are as a human being and your passion for the said subject that you're working on, and I think that's where you can go miles and miles with that.
Yeah, and I think also a lot of audiences are craving good quality content, and a lot of people don't realize that those stories actually do have a need. People do want to listen to those stories, and if you just get out there and film it, people are more likely to watch your stuff than not watch it. And I think a lot of people are apprehensive about just going and filming that amazing story that they have in mind.
Absolutely. And again, kind of getting back to where you release it, if it's YouTube, etc., like there's so much interesting stuff on YouTube. I discovered this one channel that's literally this guy that creates, it's a static shot, maybe a couple camera angles of like an aquarium that he fills with water, and he puts sand on one side and makes a dam. And it's literally like a 45-minute video of the water eventually breaking down the dam and flooding the other side. Stupid, simple, and he's got millions of subscribers. Each video has millions of views. The guy's probably making 30, 40 grand a video. I don't know. It's insane. And it's so dumb and yet so captivating. And this guy's making a killing, I'm imagining. I mean, I'm assuming so. I would hope so, based off of the views that he's getting. And he'll release a video, and I'm like, oh, another damn video. You can do anything. So if that's on YouTube and people are making money on literally that, go make your story. Go do something that's even more valuable. Do something that actually makes a difference, that can truly help this world. I mean, don't be afraid of putting something up that's not good, because you've got people making dam videos of water breaking through a bunch of dirt that takes 40 minutes, and they're making a killing off of it. So, yeah, get out and tell stories. That's really the ultimate bottom line.
I had a similar experience. I wanted to film. I had this idea that I wanted to film, and I was very passionate about it, and I didn't know if it would be well received or not. And I was watching some similar videos on YouTube and on TV, and I came to the very quick conclusion that no matter what I do, it's going to be better than that. It's impossible that it's not. It's impossible that it's going to be worse than that. It's going to be successful. And the way I think of it is, if I affect one person correctly in the way that I would like to, then it's a successful project. It just has to affect one single person. One other person has to go out and be inspired to do good in the world, and I've achieved my goal.
Absolutely. I mean, that's really kind of it, right? You want multiples of that, but if you do that for one person and you've changed their heart and mind and it's connected with them, that's worth it. That's worth all that effort to put into it to change that. Because now that person moving forward in their life can make significant change in the decisions that they make moving based off of what they learned from the program you made. That's exponential.
What advice would you give to other wildlife filmmakers who would like to follow a similar career path like yourself?
I would say that the biggest thing that I've learned, I kind of touched on it a little earlier, is to just get out and do. You don't have to be an award-winning filmmaker. You don't have to be an incredible biologist or scientist or anything. If you have a passion for something, like specifically film, if you're looking at getting into the wildlife industry and filming, I would say get out and just do. Get into your backyard with your iPhone and start filming. Start learning how to tell stories. You don't need to get expensive equipment. Just get out and start telling stories. There's people, like I said, on YouTube making videos about water breaking through dams in their little aquarium in their basement. If they're making interesting content, you can do that too. Get out and do it. And don't be afraid to fail, because you're going to fail. 100% going to happen. Just get out and do it. Learn from it. And what's that? Fail forward, right? Fall. If you fall, learn how to pick yourself up. Get out and do it again. Learn. Connect with other people in the industry. I think that's a big thing, is creating a cohort of your friends, of people that you enjoy talking to, bouncing ideas off of. I think that's another big part, is having a community of people, and a spectrum of that, whether they're new like you getting into it, or if they're a seasoned vet, like having a spectrum of people you can reach out to and connect with and talk to about ideas is a huge thing. For me, it's been invaluable. I've had people that are multi-award winning to Oscar to just starting out that are in my circle of people that I connect with. And the stuff you can learn is just invaluable from that. So get out and do. Don't be afraid to fail, and connect with other people in the industry and network across the gamut. And I think that'll set you up for success, because it'll give you the tools to know how to connect with people. It'll give you the tools to tell stories, and it'll give you the tools to know how to be determined and to move forward no matter what.
Well, thank you very much, Alan, for being on the show.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure chatting. And I hope everyone listening has the opportunity to learn something and be inspired to get out and do something impactful for nature.
So if people would like to get to know more about you, where can they find you on the internet?
Absolutely. Yeah. So you can go, obviously, Real Earth Films, and that's like a film reel, REEL. So realearthfilms.org. It's my organization. You can learn more about what we're doing there, see our films. All of our films that we release are public there, so you can see. And you can also find me on social media at Real Earth Films on Facebook, Instagram, etc. Don't have TikTok yet, but we're working on getting that up and going. Or if you want to connect with me personally, you can look me up on Instagram. And that's my name, ALANP_Lacy. So Alan P_Lacy, LACY. Would love to connect you guys. If you have questions about film, feel free to ask. I love answering questions. So hope to hear from you guys.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
It's been a pleasure, Robert. Thank you for having me.
I hope that you enjoyed listening to episode 2 of the Robert Wedderburn podcast. If you are listening to this on YouTube, then don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. And if you are listening to this on Spotify, then follow for more podcasts, and I will see you in the next episode.